Hi, everyone. Good afternoon. We're so happy to be here with you all. Before we start sharing our screen with our slides, we just want to say welcome, and we'll be with you very soon after some brief presentation. We're excited that you're here today, and I hope you look forward to the time with us to participate in community with one another. So my name is Julia Wade, and my role is based out of student conduct. I'm the Associate Director of Restorative Practices, and I've been at LMU for almost 10 years. I'm an alum. I received my master's degree at LMU in counseling. Born and raised in Los Angeles and coming to you now from View Park, California, not too far from our campus that we hope to return to very soon. And I'm so lucky to be here today with my colleague, Schoene. Please, Schoene, say a little bit more about yourself.
Thanks so much, Julia. Hello, everyone. Really great to see all of you and to be here together. So I first heard about restorative practices during my work in Baltimore. So working with the Community Conferencing Center there on court diversion cases, as well as working with young people in the schools and in the community, really gave me a great foundation before moving out to Los Angeles 10 years ago to help bring some of those practices over and to implement them here in our community. So at the Center for Urban Resilience, our mission is to work with communities to develop resilience. And to do this, the center conducts research on social and environmental topics, and we manage programs with community groups, with schools and higher education institutions. And we consider restorative practices as a way to further build resilient communities.
And we'll talk a little about this a little bit later, but we're a little bit unique in that we're a dynamic collaborative partnership on campus. So, my work being based out of student affairs and Schoene being based out of cures, but we really want that to be part of the message of this today too, is what's possible, when we reach across campus and really form these networks and connections. And, we have learned so much from Schoene and there's a lot to be done still. So with that, we'll go ahead and just start sharing. Just give me a minute to bring that up. We've already talked a little bit about, this work and what it looks like. This is really about elevating community voices. So how are we, offering this as a tool and recognizing that there's already many ways that we're talking about and building community on our campus. And that the goal of this is to really uplift that. And like I said, to offer some more resources. And so our agenda for today is just to make sure that we're all on the same page about what we mean by, restorative justice practices and the principles behind that. What are the applications of this work? What does it look like so far in terms of what we mean on our campus? We're going to engage everyone in a community building circle experience. So maybe it's not your first time doing this, but we hope that if it is, you'll learn something and debrief that so we can, have some understanding of how the process went for all of us, and have some time at the end for any questions or further dialogue together.
And as we come together, we just want to acknowledge the land that Loyola Marymount University is on, and that's the land of the Gabrielino Tongva people. And, this is important to us because restorative practices are rooted in Indigenous teachings. So this is the newest old thing around. People have been doing this for centuries. The way that I learned about restorative practices was through the Baltimore group, and the person heading that organization, her name is Dr. Lauren Abrams. She adapted a process from the Maori people of New Zealand and brought it over to Baltimore in 1995. So we learned from the Maori people that they were really tired of their children being disproportionately arrested for the same crimes that white children were committing. And so they approached the New Zealand government and asked, can we try something different? Can we try it in our own way, where we bring everyone together who is involved in the conflict to really hold people accountable and let them hear each other and learn how they've affected each other, to really understand what happened and learn how to behave differently. And so we want to carry that message with us, and where the work is rooted from. And here we have a quote from Becky McCammon, and she wrote the Restorative Practices at School. She's located up in Minnesota, and this really impacted us because it reflects perfectly the way that we feel we can deliver the work. So restorative practices must commit to racial equity and acknowledging a history of harm and injustice that is persistently present and profound in our schools each day. Restorative practices is anti-racist work. It is the work of decolonizing our schools and reconciling how we all hurt and how some inherit a legacy of loss and injustice. And here we have a definition of restorative justice practices. So I'll go ahead and read it. A philosophy based on principles that emphasize the importance of positive relationships as central to building community and involve processes that restore relationships when harm has occurred. And we want to emphasize that this is grounded in a belief that people are profoundly relational and interconnected and inherently good. And restorative practices, it includes ways of creating community that honor the importance of relationship among all members of the community, as well as practices to repair relationships when harm has been caused, and trying to meet the needs of all those people who were affected by the harm. And here we have a comparison of what are our traditional questions that we ask when harm has occurred, and then looking at it, comparing it to the restorative justice questions. So our typical questions are: what rule was broken, who broke the rule, and how can we punish them? So the focus is in the past, and the institution is determining the punishment. The person who's harmed has no say. However, with restorative justice, we're asking what happened. So people can talk step by step about things that took place even before the crime or conflict happened that led up to it, to identify the root causes. And then the second question is who's been affected and how. And it's by design an emotional process, and it helps people start to see each other from a very human vantage point. So they start hearing each other and learning about the affect, and naturally apologies come from this. And that leads them down the path to trying to figure out what can be done to repair the harm or make things better. So this is very future oriented, and everyone involved in the incident of harm is able to have a voice. So especially the person who's been harmed, they also get to say what they would like to see done. So that collective process is really important.
And just for another way of understanding, or for my visual learners out there, another way to think about, what we're talking about in terms of the totality of restorative practices and restorative justice is a continuum. So we can see kind of the term used: informal versus formal, and proactive versus responsive, right? So even thinking about how we're using language, so that could be with one another, or even in our policies, how we write up our policies and processes in an institution or in our departments, is one way of looking at and engaging in restorative practice. And then this idea that Schoene is talking about of making, developing, and maintaining relationships is the foundation. So that's really going to be the focus of our rest of our time today, because if we don't have that foundation of relationships, how can we repair the harm? There's no trust there. There's no foundation, like we were saying. And then asking restorative questions. So even just asking how someone thinks that an issue can be resolved, or when we're, communicating with one another using questions and not being directive. And then a circle process, what we'll experience today, a community building circle, is a practice that contributes to that building of relationships and fostering relationships. And then there's also circles in the context of more focused on problem solving, when a group has an issue they'd like to discuss that's relevant to them. And it's, these are safe and structured spaces for having, conversations around important topics. And then that repairing harm is a much more formal and responsive or reactive approach, with what we call a conference, that we're not going to share a lot more about today, but is certainly part of this work. And, in addition to everyone having a say, like Shana was saying, it's also really that I think we also mentioned about holding people accountable. So that those emotional pieces are involved, but there's still usually an agreement that comes out, that's a way to hold people accountable with timelines and things like that. And so because of who we are as an institution, and especially in the context of this symposium, understanding that this is really in alignment with Jesuit and Ignatian values and teachings, and not to conflate the two because there are differences there, but we wanted to highlight some of these, right? So how can we be men and women with and for others? Well, by engaging people in our community, and also not going into other communities and solving their problems for them, right? The idea is that our communities have the strength and the ability and the knowledge and the tools really to be able to resolve things. We've just moved away from that. The unity of the heart, mind, and soul, and how that factors into issues when they come up. And then absolutely for our students, especially forming and educating agents of change. So how do we want to send our students out in the world? How are they thinking about what justice means, what it looks like, and how is this a reframe? And that directly relates to, of course, faith that does justice. And then this idea of discernment, right? So giving people and everyone a chance to have their voice heard and to speak. And how can these processes really be an opportunity for reflection and for change, or for move toward, justice and equity, even when that may not have been where we were first at if something occurred. So that's just a little bit about that connection that we really wanted to share.
Thanks so much, Julia. And here we just wanted to outline some of the things that have been happening over at Cures. So just to also honor that this center, the Restorative Justice Project, was started as the Center for Restorative Justice by Professor Scott Wood over at the law school, at Loyola Law School. And he implemented the center, and it was a really wonderful space for people to come and talk about restorative practices and really delve into it through a scholarly lens and also a community lens. And then when it came over to the main campus in 2013, that's when we started our work. We began working with school-aged children, and the program grew from there. So we've trained 55 schools in restorative practices, and they represent 10 districts. And what that means is we actually train the teachers and the administrators to hold community building circles with their students, so that they form bonds and connect with each other, so that when harm naturally occurs, they have a way to respond. And then through our work, we've also been able to facilitate over 300 restorative conferences. So those are the more serious kinds of cases where a conflict has happened, where we bring in multiple people and their families and give them an opportunity to really hold them accountable and learn from it, learn from what happened, and also create a plan to make sure it doesn't happen again and make things better. And then most recently, we've launched the Southern California Restorative Justice Consortium. And what we've been able to do is bring 32 organizations from surrounding counties to be able to share lessons learned, to also conduct research together. So we're embarking upon a research project this month, and then perhaps find ways to fundraise together as well, but just a support system to help people in the immediate area. And we hope it'll become a model for other regions.
And so thanks so much, Shana. As I mentioned at the beginning, this has been a partnership that was born, almost 3 years ago in terms of student affairs and cures. And, our interest really came out of conduct and kind of looking at what types of reports and cases we were getting, and realizing that a lot of maybe interpersonal issues or just issues that came up or conflicts were kind of being funneled to our office as, how do we do something about this or respond to this, or engage people in a conversation, because we do our work well, and we really believe in the integrity of our processes and conduct, but that maybe we needed another tool. And so doing some research, we realized we had an expert in our backyard in Shana, and so we've to this point trained almost 40 staff either in the community building, facilitation, or conferencing harm senses. We have a facilitator work group that meets on a monthly basis, which I'll share a little bit more about later. All our residence life staff and our resident advisor staff have been through some form of training. We worked closely with Sorority and Fraternity Life. So that was really around issues that were important to that student group, regarding just introducing them to restorative practices, and then also confronting issues around like drug and alcohol use and inclusion. And then the learning community is just another example of a cohort we've worked with. We also added this policy language to our standards last year, and we have facilitated 7 conduct cases through conferences. So issues like theft, disruptive behavior, and vandalism that were occurring with student behavior on our campus. So actually bring a student together with the person that they harmed or impacted, and those included other departments on campus, like public safety or parking, things of that nature, to talk about what happened. And then, a huge thing that we're happy about this past year was even virtually finding out how to engage and do this work, and it's continued. So we engaged all of our new students, first year and transfer students, across 70 sections of orientation in community building circles. So you'll get to experience what that was like, what that is like today, but really using it as a tool to build community, to get to know one another with different questions each week, so that students could, share and learn about each other, even in this, like I said, in this virtual environment. And then in the division, and what we're calling our efforts around restorative practices and student affairs, LMU Restore. So you'll see that on our webpage, et cetera.
Julia, before we move on,
I wanted to share the anecdote about one of our new students that came through orientation. And what we're learning is that we're kind of building on practices that students may have experienced before coming to their LMU. So one of our new transfer students actually shared that she had an experience in a prior institution of restorative justice practices and using community building circles. And she wasn't sure if LMU was, the correct institution for her, but the fact that the facilitator in her orientation was using circle practices helped her realize, she had made the right choice in our campus, that she felt welcomed, and that she had, this opportunity to really connect, and that we as a campus kind of like understood her in a different way. So that was just a beautiful, piece of feedback that we got that we really wanted to understand. And we're really interested in the impact of this. So one other thing that we wanted to, share is just some of our ideas about how this work will continue. And we'll engage in experience after this and come back together about more ways that you all can hopefully connect, but continuing to use our community building circles in, residence life with conflicts or issues that come up, that could be part of problem solving, but also just community building when, new students are entering our campus and living in community with one another. with faculty, staff, and students. So how is this applicable to all of our stakeholders on our campus, right? So we're in our monthly facilitator work groups, we're actually engaging in circles as staff to build connection and community. We'll continue to offer conferences. So when we feel that it's appropriate and if students are interested in taking accountability for their actions and having a conversation, that's something that can be offered to them. And then how can we think about and continue to respond to critical matters or have proactive conversations around anti-racism and race and the elections or whatever matters most to us at that time as a community. And so now at this time, we're going to transition, and we'd really like to invite everyone into the space to have this conversation with us and to practice, to engage in a practice. So we'd invite you to turn on your cameras, actually, if you feel comfortable doing that. That will help us kind of engage most readily with one another. And then stay on mute for now, but you'll be able to engage and have, share at the time that's appropriate. So for now, just joining us with your camera on, we'd love to welcome you at this time. And so I'll go ahead and just share a next slide before I stop sharing.
And we'll go over these when in our breakout rooms. But these are the circle guidelines.
We're staying as a group, right, Shana?
Pardon me?
We're staying as a large group, right?
Oh, we are? Okay, that's great. Yeah. Okay, so thank you. Thanks for that clarification. So if we were in a circle, typical of being able to see each other and hear each other, we would ordinarily have a talking piece. In this case, we're just asking as part of our circle, if we could show respect to each other just by going one at a time. And speaking from the heart and listening from the heart is really critical in this work so that we can talk about our own experiences and also try to stay as much as possible out of judgment with people. We also oftentimes use a nonverbal gesture. So this would allow us, while we're being quiet and listening to others, to be able to acknowledge what they're saying or maybe agree with them or let them know that we see and hear them. And a typical hand gesture that we've used is the hearing impaired sign for applause. Other groups use different things, but if it's okay with everyone, we can go ahead and use that today as our gesture. And then we want to make sure that we share airtime. So say just as much as you think you need to say, but also being mindful of others in the group. And then finally, we have a blank line, and the blank line is there in case we're missing anything. So please let us know in the chat or verbally if we are missing anything that you think we should add. And by the way, we're okay with awkward silences because we just want to make sure we don't miss out on an opportunity for our community members to share. I'll throw another one up there, and it is that you have the right to pass if you want. So the first thing we want to do is just check in with each other. So what we're going to do is indicate with our fingers on a scale from 1 to 5, how are you feeling right now? So 1, things aren't going really well. 5 is on the brighter end of the spectrum. So if you could just flash for the group what number you're feeling right now, and just take a look around. And this is a really nice way to check in with people and just see where they're at. And we recommend trying this with your own community groups. And for those of you who displayed a 3 or 2 or 1, we just want you to know that we're here for you and we're available to talk afterwards. And even if we don't have all the answers, we may be able to put you in touch with somebody who could help. So just wanted to mention that. So if you could, if you'd like to participate, what we'd like you to do is in the chat, enter your first name. And what that's going to do, it'll allow us to figure out an order of the conversation. So just your first name in the chat would be very helpful.
Is everyone able to do that okay? And see, I know there's multiple, okay, great.
Okay. So while people are adding their names, I'd like to ask you to think about this particular, an answer to this particular question. So what is your favorite dessert? Okay, we're going to keep it really fun and simple. What's your favorite dessert? And I know what mine is, but would anyone like to go first, and then whoever accordingly?
Well, I'll jump in. I'll say I love chocolate, so I have to say it's anything chocolate.
All right, Kat, Matt, and Laura.
It's really, really hard to choose, but right now, as of this moment, it's a caramel bread pudding.
Oh my gosh.
I'd say that it's this British dessert called sticky toffee pudding. So good.
It's also pretty hard to choose, but I would have to say brownies.
Oh, yeah. Now we're going back to the top of the list. So my very favorite is cookie dough ice cream by Ben and Jerry's. Julia?
I've been doing silent applause for everything. I don't know if you can tell that I just like sweet things. But my absolute favorite would have to be a molten chocolate lava cake. So when it gets anything that's gooey chocolate in the middle. And Jamal, I think you're up next.
Oh, perfect. Yes. Mine is also Ben and Jerry's ice cream, but the dairy free. My body gets so much happier with that one.
The dairy-free ice cream from Ben and Jerry's is very good. I will second that. I would say just ice cream in general, though. If I want to make sure that I feel really good afterwards, then dairy-free is the way to go. But otherwise, just ice cream in general.
Great. All right. So thanks for indulging us. Now we know what we can bring to your birthday party. So for our next question, we'd like to ask, who's someone you admire and why? And I'm happy to go first this time, but I wanted to give you a minute to think about that. Who's someone you admire? Hopefully that's given you some time to think. So the person I admire, someone I admire is my father. So he married my mother after she had 4 children. So she was widowed and divorced, and unfortunately, or fortunately, she met my father. And I think there's a special place in heaven for him, because that's a lot to, it's a lot of work to help raise 4 children. And I was 2 years old at the time. So really grew up with him and consider him my father, and really respect and want to honor his sacrifices. Julia?
Yeah, for me, it's pretty personal as well. I think my mom, and I think, you know, the relationship has changed so much over the years. It might just be me, but when you're a teenage girl, you hate your mom, or you just think that she's the worst. And I just have so much different perspective now, because I think she really did the best that she could with the tools that she had, like her entire life. And she didn't have the opportunity to have like an adult relationship with her mom. But the way that she's like, you know, our relationship has just developed into something more beautiful now. And I'm a twin. So she was mom of 2 all the time. And yeah, so I think she's just a model for, you know, how she treats people and how she raised me, and like her strength and awareness. So yeah.
Can you hear me?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, good. I admire Shayna. I'm Scott Wood. Thanks for mentioning me, Shana, in connection with starting this project. But you've taken it to such tremendous success. And I'm also delighted that Julie is now partnering with you. So it's really making my day.
Oh,
I can go. I come from a line of very strong women, and so my grandmother and my mother, admire how they can keep everything and everyone together all the time without losing it. And so I hope that I can live up to that.
Go. For me, it's an artist, Megan Thee Stallion. I feel as though she just lives so unapologetically and goes into any space knowing that she's just going to be her and people can adapt as they need to because she's not going to change. Also, the fact that she's so body positive and so like progressive amongst the LGBTQ plus community and has given back in different ways. So she's one of my top people.
I can go next. I say my dad also. I just think always growing up, he has just had the best like mentality on life. He's always just been so kind and he has such a great sense of humor and his work ethic is so great. And especially with just how stressful times are now, he's really been there for me, which like has really shown me like how you treat someone. And so he's just been a big influence on my life.
I can go. I would also say my parents, both of them, they work really well together personally and professionally. They own an optometric practice together. So they've been working together a long time. And then also just, it's really important to me and something that I see in them every day is that they always support me and my sister. And my younger sister has autism and there are a lot of ups and downs on a daily basis, which I'm seeing more of now because while I was away at college, it was kind of out of sight, not thinking about it as much. But now that I'm home during quarantine, it's definitely front of mind for me. And they've just always both been incredibly patient and incredibly supportive and doing everything they can to help her, which I've just always really admired the way that they've just always never given up on her, even when times are really tough. So I really admire them. On a broader level, I also really admire Stacey Abrams. I love Stacey Abrams. I think she's an incredible, incredible person with all the work she's doing. And she's really authentic too, which I don't feel like is something you see in politicians all the time, but she's just a very authentic person. So I really admire her too.
I admire Stephanie. I've been very impressed with her in the time that I've gotten to work with her and her organization skills and initiative and communication skills are very impressive to me, and I really admire that about her.
The person who first came to mind, and this surprised me a little bit, is my father-in-law, who for something like 30 years now has commuted an hour and a half to 2 hours each way to work, and then has come home on the weekends, and he's a musician and he plays music for his church community like 3 or 4 times over the course of a weekend for multiple services every week for decades, and is just a beloved member of that community and retains a positive attitude and always energy, always has time for his family. And I admire so much about that. And I hope that 30 years from now, I can have his level of energy and dedication.
Well, I'm sort of at a loss. Stephanie, you have my vote, I tell you. And I have to say, I've spent so many years, 52 years in the community, that I think of one particular sister in my life that's really been steadfast. She's now deceased. However, during all these difficult decision-making times, during some of the sort of difficult assignments I had, which I didn't think I was capable of doing, she was there not to say, oh, it's fine, you can do it, but to say, so what is it about this that's hard for you? And where is that coming from? And here's what I see makes it possible for you to move ahead. And that way of communicating with people has stayed with me, to have that conversation and to help. She helped me draw on my own resources and put things in perspective. And I've been eternally grateful for that. Every once in a while I say, I wish you were still here. And I need that kind of voice. And I know she's there. But Lucia was just a major support and influence for me.
I would also have to say that my parents are people that I admire quite a bit, just like in regards to how much support they've given to me during like all the changes that COVID has presented, and just overall what they've gone through in their own lives. They're just people I very much admire.
Well, thank you so much for sharing. It really helps, gives us insight into who you are, and hopefully when we see each other again, we can continue the conversation. So to close out, what I'd like to invite you to do, if you feel up to it, you can write in the chat one word to describe how you're feeling after this experience. And then after we gather those notes, Julia will take the helm. So one word to describe how you're feeling. So we have hopeful, connected, inspired, connected, open, peaceful. Great. And harmonious. Lovely.
So thank you so much, everyone. We wanted to just do a little bit of a debrief with you. So I'm wondering if anyone has any feedback initially. We also wanted to share, just so you understand kind of what this process was, an outline of what we did. So we started out with those guidelines, or norms, depending on the group, we tend to use those kind of terms. We did that check-in. We had an opening, and we really just did a fun and celebratory kind of talking piece around, what we liked for dessert. And then we moved on to something that was a little bit more meaningful, and we used that exercise in the chat as a closing. So did anyone have any other reactions or thoughts, or now seeing the structure that you wanted to share after engaging in this experience?
I think it was terrific. It was clear, concise, informative, substantive, and enjoyable.
Thank you, Scott.
And I also see how this could have brought us to another level. You could just hear in what was shared that there was another level emerging, and it would be an opening for further kinds of conversation to me.
Thank you. Anyone else?
I really enjoyed the opening check-in and prompt. This is a group that most of us perhaps may not know one another, or may not know one another well. And that was an excellent way for us to immediately feel not just connected and listened to, but that we actually knew something about one another before moving into a more meaningful talking prompt.
Thanks. Yeah, so even using our fingers is a way of communicating without words. Sometimes we forget, right, how simple communication can be, and how we can kind of connect to a different part of ourselves and to one another, even with something fairly brief and straightforward. Anyone else?
Was anyone surprised by their experience?
I'm not necessarily surprised, but just tacking on something else that I appreciated was the nonverbal sign of affirmation. I think that's really important because it shows that everyone's actively listening to each other. And I think sometimes that can get lost in a lot of conversations if everyone's pitching in different ideas or thoughts. So I think that having that affirmative statement in a nonverbal way is really informative and helpful.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, and I think especially in this kind of virtual setting, right? Hopefully you can't imagine what being in circle, it kind of pulls all the distractions away when, you know, you're centered up with one another. But even being on the screen, right, we see each other in a different way. And like you said, there's that active engagement and listening when that happens. And sorry, Jamal, I think it looks like you have something else to share.
No, you are so good. Yes, when it comes to speaking in a group, especially people that I don't necessarily know, I usually get super anxious and stumble a lot, but I feel as though coming into this space and just the tone that was set before we even started talking, or like the check-in and stuff, was a lot more welcoming. So I really appreciate that.
Well, you all said it better than we, you know, all could have. Not a lot to add there, but just again, wanted you to see, you know, so much has been shared about the power of this, the potential of this, but also a reminder about how simple, again, the structure is. We wanted to just kind of start to wrap up with just kind of like a reminder. And so I think, Sheena, you were just going to speak a little bit more to this.
Sure. And just that restorative practices is truly cultivating a sense of belonging. So if we're connected, if we're able to talk to each other about things that are fun and lighthearted in our lives, that hopefully we form a trust and a bond that'll allow us to talk about or come back together and problem solve when things don't go so great. And this work it's really a philosophy. So it's an attitude that you take with you. It's not a program or another initiative. It's not a discipline system. Unfortunately, it's not a magic wand, and it's not therapy. So neither Julia nor I are licensed in therapy. However, you'll remember back to the hand signals. We mentioned if anyone has a number lower than 3 or lower, if you'd like to talk to us, we are available. And then we would put people in touch with someone else who would be more qualified, an expert at that. Also, it's not just a box to check off, it's actually meaningful. So this work can help shift our climate and culture. It's relational, as you experienced, and it's a way of thinking and being. And as much as possible, instead of coming to a community and providing answers, we really want to ask first, what is it that you need? So back to those 3 questions, the what happened, who's been affected and how, and what can be done to repair the harm, rather than us offering unsolicited advice, or even though it is very well intended, we really want to honor the community and learn more about what the specific needs are and how we can help meet those needs.
Yeah, and I just wanted to add, I think, to that last point too, it harkens back to where we started with this work being anti-racist and, you know, looking at history and also looking forward. So how does asking questions lead us to asking questions about systems too and larger structures? So the individual and the relational is so important, but also how by listening can we understand what would be needed to make larger changes or to be part of that change together. So that's just another, you know, this work has broader implications in moving us toward that way as well. Just some more resources and opportunities we want to offer. So how could we stay connected to this work? Well, you know, Shane and I offering more presentations like this, maybe there's a group or a student or a department that you're part of that you think could benefit from learning more. Trainings around restorative practices, so just further practice around the circle practice that we just engaged in, or offering ourselves for facilitators around a circle process or a conferencing process. And as I mentioned, we've also trained a larger group of folks. We also recognize that we are, two white women doing this work, and we are training and engaging other stakeholders and people that hold other identities, because there may be times when for circles or other processes, it might be more appropriate to have a facilitator that identifies in a different way or has a greater connection to a specific community to handle and be a part of that work in that way. So just offering that too, that there are more than just us engaging in this, and that there's kind of a team behind this. What other ideas do you have? How can we collaborate, lift your voices of things that you're doing or organizations that you're a part of? And then an open invitation. Please do reach out to us if you'd like to kind of see what this monthly work group looks like. It's generally a meeting on Fridays midday once a month, and it's bringing together people who are interested in talking about and doing more of this work. And I know we all have probably a million things to do, but it's just a way to even connect and drop in, even if it's once, to see what that is like. And Jamal's been a great addition to that group. So just wanted to make sure that people know that there's ways to connect and invite. And then Shane has also placed our emails in the chat to stay connected that way. And you can find more on the web, on our websites, both in Student Affairs and Shayna's website through Cures. And so really just kind of, to close, that call to action is important, I think, right? So humans are hardwired to connect, not forgetting that. And we need strong and meaningful relationships to thrive. And I think the situation that we've been in with COVID has only underlined some of that. And but that takes effort, right? That takes reaching out and building connection. And I think we do have a little bit of time left. So if there's questions, if people feel comfortable just speaking up or want to type in the chat, we're here to keep engaging with the rest of our time. I don't know if there's anything else you wanted to add, Sheena, but I'll go ahead and just stop sharing so we can see one or two.
That was great. Thank you for wrapping it up that way. And the only thing I'll add is just, the importance of working with young people in schools, so that as they get older and they enter the workforce and also higher ed, that to give them tools to be able to advocate for themselves, to feel comfortable speaking in front of a group. All these things are really invaluable and terribly important for thriving. And so as much as possible, we want to make sure we include every single generation possible in this work, because all it does is help all of our interactions and communities.
If one was interested in becoming a facilitator, what is the process, or who would we contact?
So the Center for Urban Resilience offers trainings in partnership with the Division of Student Affairs. And so feel free to email us. We'd love to talk to you. And what will happen is if we get a big enough group that's interested, we can figure out a time that would make sense based on, coordinating schedules. That's the tough part. But once we determine a time, it's typically a 12-hour training, and then it's followed by an apprenticeship program. So what that means is after you've been trained to be a conference facilitator, you would shadow someone who acts as a facilitator now and watch and observe their technique in terms of how they handle a case. You'll do that 2 times before you get a chance to take your own case. And each facilitator is always paired with an observer to have there for support. And after the trainee has gone through the apprenticeship program, then we sit down and talk about next steps. So there's an evaluation process. Mm-hmm. And through that evaluation process, our hope is to help guide people to the best possible place in terms of their work in advocating or facilitating. So not everyone is wired to be a facilitator. And so, but we don't want to miss the chance after someone's been trained. We want to make sure that we're capitalizing on their gifts. And so figuring out the best plan is, we're really dedicated to that.
Yeah, and I think that's it's really important, and that's more on the conference and harm. I think if folks were interested in more of like the circle practice and community building, that could be something. It still requires, you know, more training, but the commitment and the time, I hope it's okay that I'm saying that, Sheena, would look a little bit different. And is definitely, it would be a similar process of just figuring out and identifying, you know, do we have a group of folks that's interested, so that we would be able to offer it at a time and in a place that makes sense.
And during the restorative justice work groups meetings each month, we take turns being the facilitator, so we can offer practicing options for you as well, just to be supportive and help make sure it's as smooth a transition as possible.
Thank you.
Sheena and Julia, thank you so much. Even just this brief time has been really informative and inspiring, and I'd be interested in learning more and developing these skills too. I can already see potential applications in a lot of the work that I do, but I was curious, are there contexts or circumstances or communities with whom this type of a process might not be recommended or might not be appropriate? Or is this really just sort of a broadly applicable set of principles?
I'm so glad you asked that question. It's really important. This is completely voluntary. So we would extend an invitation to someone, and it's up to them whether or not they want to participate. And so you'll hear the term buy-in a lot, and we're not interested in buy-in. It's actually just, would you care to participate in this process with us? And then honoring people where they are, so that we're not coming in and telling people that they have to abide by these ways, these methodologies, but rather really be sensitive to what the needs of the community are.
And I just wanted to add, I think, to that, because that's, yes, thank you so much for asking the question, and for Sheena always articulating things so well. Just, you know, maybe some concrete examples too of the work that we've been doing with students. So there's definitely situations like where harm is involved, where so that involves like prep meetings. So it would become evident a lot of times if this process wouldn't be appropriate, because there'd be meetings prior to actually bring folks together that happen separately, where, you know, we wouldn't want to cause any more harm, right? That's one of the fundamentals. So absolutely, if people are not ready, or if this is not, or if it's not voluntary, or just because some sort of situations it may not, you know, be appropriate, then, you know, that would be a reason to choose a different option. And then even with circles, right? So with, you know, communities that we've been invited into, it's consulting someone in that community, like in selecting the questions. For example, you saw the questions we used today, but weighing in with someone in that community, would this question resonate with you? Is this something that your group wants to talk about? And also providing those questions in advance to the group, so that no one's caught off guard, so that everyone knows. That degree of transparency is really important too, so that everyone knows, you know, what the expectation is and what the plan is, if you will. And there's still a genuine experience, but it gives people an opportunity to kind of know what's going to happen and how things are going to go. So I just wanted to add those two pieces of, you know, like we wouldn't ask the same questions in a service organization or when working with a student service organization that we would with like the learning community, for example, or, you know, other stakeholders and groups on campus. So it's very much, that experience is meant to be relevant to that group.
Thank you.
Well said, Julia.
I just wanted to add that on behalf of the Center and for Reconciliation and Justice, if there continues to be any way we can support work or an endeavor or something that you feel you'd like someone else to partner with, or you know, just even have a broader audience for, if we can be ever helpful in those ways, we'd certainly like to continue to extend that opportunity. We've already done that before. And once again, I'm reminded at the breadth and the net you have out there for the broader community. So if I'm not sure what that would look like, but I just throw it out there into the ether so that, you know, we would be glad to have a conversation or be there to be supportive or whatever it is we should be doing at that moment. So, and the times we have worked together, it's always been a wonderful experience. So thank you for those opportunities. And this opportunity is fabulous.
We're just so grateful to be here today, and thank you for putting together the symposium. We know that takes a lot of hard work, and so we're just honored that we could be a part of things today. And if there's anything we can do to be of support to the Center for Reconciliation and Justice, certainly we stand ready.
Thank you.
Well, great. Thank you, everyone. We do hope that you'll reach out, and we really are interested in hearing from you how this work might apply to, the work that you're already doing. And, I'm guessing I'm seeing, some faces I recognize and others that I don't, that we are representative of some different corners and different stakeholders on our campus. And that's such a beautiful thing that we could be brought together and have this time together. So yes, thank you, Marianne and Stephanie and everyone for all your support. And we look forward to, a longer partnership of being in communication with one another.